All right, welcome back to InfoWars Nightly News. I'm your fill-in host this evening, Mike Adams, filling in for Alex Jones. Thank you for continuing with us here. We've got interesting news about genetically modified organisms that are found in foods in which you might not expect them. A new study put out by the Cornucopia Report has found that so-called natural breakfast cereal products are actually loaded, in many cases, with genetically modified ingredients. Sometimes as much as 50% genetically engineered corn is found in some of these products. And in fact, a few products that are labeled as GMO-free were actually found to contain substantial levels of GMOs. There's a lot more news breaking about this in the days ahead on both the Alex Jones Show and, of course, InfoWars Nightly News. We broke this story on Natural News as well, and we will continue to have coverage there. We also interviewed, by the way, Mark Castell from the Cornucopia Institute on the Alex Jones Show today, so check that archive if you haven't yet heard that interview. In additional news, we've got Komen for the Cure denies any link between cancer and BPA. That's bisphenol A, the plastics chemical found in packaged food and made worse by microwaving your food in plastic, by the way. That really causes that BPA to go into your food. It's also found in nearly all canned foods because of the resin lining in the cans. It contains a high level of BPA. So why is Komen for the Cure denying any link to BPA? Could it be a follow the money issue? Could it be that some of the donors to the Komen for the Cure nonprofit are actually selling products made with BPA in their packaging materials? Well, we don't have all the answers to that, but it's certainly worth asking some questions, and we will have continued coverage of that issue on the Alex Jones Show. Next item, unvaccinated children versus vaccinated children. Who's really healthier? Care to take a guess? Well, you know, the vaccine industry has been terrified about the possibility of a study being done that would compare the actual health outcomes of vaccinated children versus unvaccinated children. But guess what? A survey has been done that provides some early details about the answers to that very question. And guess what? Shouldn't be surprising either. Those who are vaccinated were found to have more than double the allergy rates and up to 800% more risk of developing asthma and chronic bronchitis than unvaccinated children. So that's the answer for you there. Unvaccinated children are healthier than vaccinated children. All right, and related to the vaccine issue is the whole question of government power. Obviously, federal governments mandate vaccination policies in the United States and many countries. But it begs the question, what else does the government, the federal government, have power to do, especially in terms of overruling states' rights on issues that impact us all? And here to help answer that question is Bryce Shonka from the 10th Amendment Center, who's going to talk a little bit about government and Occupy Wall Street. Now, Bryce, thanks for joining us here today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. It's really great to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you. What's your take on Occupy Wall Street today? Is it moving in the right direction? Is it still chaos? What's the outcome going to be in your view?
Well, in my view, it's the start of something. It's the genesis of something that we haven't seen before, possibly ever in American history, because it seems like in the past, like with the Vietnam War movement, the issue was clear. That everybody knew why they were there. This is a movement of people who simply know that something's wrong, and that's what's bringing them out. And the message is being shaped. The ideologies are coming in, and the claws are attempting to grasp onto this movement of young people. But I've been down to Occupy Seattle, and I spent quite a bit of time there last week. And what I saw was not represented by the mainstream media views. Shocker.
Yeah, well, what specifically? For example, were there a lot of Ron Paul supporters there, or the Fed supporters, but they weren't being interviewed by the mainstream media? Is that what you mean?
Oh, yeah, there certainly were that. There was also just a spirit amongst the people that I did spend quite a bit of time talking to, that they weren't interested in just jumping on board with some other ideology or having some other organization or some kind of other, philosophy come in and just dominate the thing. They seemed really determined to keep it an independent and free spirit, keep it a place where everybody's voice could be heard. I know that was something that was kind of a big deal when I was down there. There really weren't too many restrictions on who was allowed to talk to the group. when they were forming their General Assembly. So in my opinion, if you have strong feelings about the way we should move forward as a society, you should get down there and make your voice heard, period.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's great advice. I totally support activism and getting off your couches and off your butts and hitting the streets on this issue. But let me ask you this. Many of the protesters we know are calling for bigger government solutions. They're saying, you know, government is going to solve all these problems that we're facing today. And yet the organization that you represent, that you are with, the 10th Amendment Center, is helping to educate people about limits on federal power and the sovereign rights of states. So how do you see this issue ultimately playing out with Occupy Wall Street protesters, Bryce?
Well, if the solution that they wind up with is a solution that calls for force by the government, then A, they're marching themselves right back into the place that they say that they're trying to come from. You know, they're asking the beast to help them with controlling the beast. It doesn't make any sense. So hopefully they reach that conclusion on their own. But at 10th Amendment Center, you know, we reach out to groups all the time that don't necessarily have their entire ideology in line with ours. There's some things that they stand for that we don't necessarily agree with. The point is, if you're interested in decentralizing this out-of-control government, if you're interested in following the Constitution, every issue, every time, no exceptions, no excuses, then you're on our side. It doesn't matter what group you say you're with. It doesn't matter who you voted for. That's our position. We will take all comers. But if you're proposing that we enlarge an already out-of-control federal government, then that's not something that I can be a part of. I just see it as a stage where the page is still being written on what they're even doing. If you look at the demands of the Occupy Seattle group, for instance, number one was corporate accountability. Okay, that's not so very communist. That's something I can agree with, and it's a little vague. And then the next one down was to abolish the Federal Reserve. Now that's something that I could really get behind, because it's taking a huge slice out of the out-of-control monster that is Washington, D.C.
Well, yeah, clearly those are two key issues, but then it seems like some of the other proposals or demands by perhaps some of the more liberal-leaning groups are being made in complete ignorance of history, because history shows that forming a just and fair government is a very tricky business, and most of the ideas throughout history have failed. So why do they think that just because they have good intentions that their ideas are going to work? Seems like we've got to go with a blueprint that does work, and that blueprint already exists.
Well, the blueprint already exists. It's been left in the back of the shed collecting dust for, you know, at least 100 years now. And all of these kids, let's be fair, all of these kids went through schools where the final say on what was being taught was the Federal Board of Education. So why in the world would they think anything other than the federal government is there to help me get through life? It's what they've been taught all of their lives. And, you know, everybody in the liberty movement that I know of had sort of a moment where they unplugged from that sense of faith in the central government and realized that it is what it is, just a machine designed to grow larger and to control more and more of our lives.
Bryce, I want to ask you about your Nullify Now conferences, which you have taking place all across the country to help educate people. I'm sure many of the people who have been at your conferences are now participating in the Occupy Wall Street protests and adding some real intelligent economic views to the debate. Tell us about Nullify Now, if you would, please. Sure.
Well, Nullify Now was something that we started at 10th Amendment Center just over a year ago, and I think we're closing in on 12 cities now total on the tour. It's been an amazing experience because the kind of outreach you can get when you show up somewhere is completely different than what you get through a website or discussion group online, or, you know, even like with our new radio show, TRX. There's no substitute for just being in front of someone, shaking their hand, showing them that I'm just another human being wanting to share these ideas, wanting to educate, wanting to make things better for everybody. And so that's what we've been doing. We're going to Jacksonville, Florida on October 22nd, which is our next event, featuring Tom Woods, Jack Hunter, you know, and then a whole slew of other names, including Michael Bolden, founder of 10th Amendment Center. So, yeah, we've been doing these events. We price them cheap. We want people to be able to go. We don't want to do a, you know, $75 a plate thing even. You know, you can get into Nullify Now, I think right now for $5 for Jacksonville, because I believe there's a special on.
All right.
For free.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, we're trying to create, and, you know, and to be honest with you, I imagine at some point if hopefully the climate is fertile enough, I imagine doing like a Nullify Now rally at one of these Occupy events.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, Bryce. NullifyNow.com, is that the website where people can find the schedule?
Yeah. NullifyNow.com. It's all about educating. It's all about transpartisan activism. No more, left versus right. Let's just work together. Let's push back.
Let me ask you one more thing, Bryce, if you would please. If I could ask you to summarize, what is it that the 10th Amendment Center really wants? What do you believe in? Summarize it in 30 or 60 seconds so people really understand where you're coming from.
What we want is to restore the balances that were designed in the Constitution, which means that there's a check on the federal government, and that check is the states. It is not the Supreme Court, like so many people like to think. Supreme Court are just a bunch of guys in black dresses. I mean, they really don't hold that kind of position in the scheme that the founders devised. And so 10th Amendment Center is really all about breaking down federal power, breaking apart the machine into pieces that are manageable, pieces that are far less likely to be corrupted, and to really just return power to the people as states, as counties, as local communities. It's all about keeping it local. It's all about people taking care of each other instead of relying on this monstrous machine called the centralized state to do it for them.
Well said, Bryce. I want to thank you for joining us here on InfoWars Nightly News. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. Appreciate your input.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Bryce. All right. Well, that's it for InfoWars Nightly News. Thank you for joining us in this whirlwind of news that we've been bringing to you here. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe at prisonplanet.tv, and you'll have this kind of breaking news brought to you each weeknight. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your support. This is Mike Adams, the Health Ranger, filling in tonight for Alex Jones with InfoWars Nightly News. Good night. Take care.